When I moved to Singapore about 4 months ago, one of my biggest struggles was finding a place to live. I spent weeks of constant searching, did a ton of research online. I wanted to make this video just to share some of my experiences searching for an apartment here in Singapore and share some helpful tips. All right, so just to start off, here were my basic requirements for my ideal apartment that I was looking for. Since I was moving to Singapore alone, I decided to look for a 1-bedroom or studio apartment just to live by myself. I was also looking for something fairly central, close to the city center, so that it would be easy for me to get around. I also wanted ample amounts of space since I would be working from home, since I work remotely. And so I was looking for something around at least like 500 square feet. In terms of my budget, I was looking for something at most around 3,000 Singapore dollars per month. I ended up realizing that this is pretty much impossible to satisfy here in Singapore. Okay, so there are 3 broad categories of housing that someone can rent in Singapore. The first category are HDBs, and this stands for Housing Development Board. These are public housing units that actually most Singaporean citizens will live in and are off limits for foreigners to purchase, but foreigners can rent these units as well. If you're looking for a 1-bedroom or studio HDB, these generally don't really exist because these units are primarily built for families, and so they usually come in like a 3 to 5 room configuration, and so it's unlikely to be able to find a HDB for yourself. The other main type of housing that you'll find in Singapore are condos, and these are private developments that cater more towards Singapore's foreigner population. They are a little more expensive than HDBs, but come with nicer amenities, usually with a pool, a gym, other recreational facilities. The last category of housing that I'll just briefly mention are landed properties. These are what you can think of as single family homes, and these are just way out of my budget range, and so I didn't even consider looking at those. All right, so those are the different types of housing available in Singapore for rent. As someone moving to Singapore alone, generally the only viable option to look at are condos. And so the way that you go about doing this is you just look on websites like either Property Guru or 99.co. These are rental marketplaces. You can filter by a certain price point, square footage, number of rooms. Okay, so let's say you found a condo that looks promising. You message the agent on WhatsApp, and then they'll ask for a bunch of profile information. And then once you send them this information, then you can arrange a viewing. That's pretty much the process, and it's basically the same thing for every agent that you talk to. There are a few interesting things to know when you're looking at apartments. A lot of the apartments here will come either fully furnished or partially furnished, and this can either be a good thing or bad thing depending on what you're looking for. Back in the States, I think it's a bit less common to find fully furnished apartments, but in Singapore, it's actually more common. Having a fully furnished apartment ready to go could make life easier for you if you don't want to worry about finding furniture, but at the same time, it could make it a little more expensive, and the furniture could be of poor quality. Another important thing that I realized only after I started looking at these apartments and talking to these agents was that most condo rentals will have a 2-year minimum rental contract, which I thought was very restrictive compared to back in the States where most apartment rental contracts were for a 1-year lease at minimum. As a renter, this is pretty difficult to work with because committing to a 2-year lease doesn't provide a lot of flexibility in case you don't like the place, don't like the neighborhood, you're kind of stuck there for 2 years. I didn't even know if I was going to be staying here for that long in the first place. It might be possible to negotiate for a 1-year lease, but you'll usually have to pay more rent, and rent is already pretty expensive, and so it's not a great deal either way. Another interesting thing to note is that when you look at the listed price for some of these units on Property Guru or whatever website you're using, the actual price that you can negotiate down to is usually around like 10% lower than the list price. And this is pretty standard for all of the units I was looking at. I didn't even have to negotiate that hard. When you're doing your search, you might want to look for units that are just like slightly above your budget because usually you can negotiate down. Let's say you arrange a viewing with a property agent and then you go down to look at the condo. Usually what would happen in my case is I'd go look at it. The space would be really small and really expensive. So a lot of the units I was looking at were around like 400 to 500 square feet for a 1-bedroom or studio apartment. And they were asking for somewhere in the range of like 3,000 to 4,000 Singapore dollars per month, which I thought was really expensive in terms of just the price per square foot that you were getting. For most of the condo units that I looked at, I wasn't very impressed. I mean, a lot of them did have nice amenities like a pool and gym, which is pretty standard for condos, but the main thing that I was looking for actually was space. After searching for a 1-bedroom or studio apartment for a couple weeks, I eventually actually just gave up on that and realized that if I relax my constraints a little bit, I could get a much better deal. And so then I actually considered looking for like a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom apartment and splitting with some housemates. I ended up just looking on Facebook groups, and so I recommend doing this as well if you're trying to find housemates. And it's actually a lot nicer, in my opinion, to do this because the people that are generally posting on these Facebook groups are people that are moving out of their apartment and looking for someone to take over the lease, or someone moved out of one of the rooms. Generally, when you're responding to these Facebook posts, you're actually talking to people that live in the apartment or have lived in the apartment. And so you get a much better sense of what that unit is like. And I just like talking to tenants directly more than property agents. And so I thought going through Facebook groups was easier for me. So I responded to a bunch of posts on Facebook, and I actually did find a pretty nice 3-bedroom apartment that I really liked, and I went to go view it, and the housemates were really nice. So that's how I ended up finding my current apartment that I'm living in right now. And so my main takeaway from this whole experience is that if you're moving to Singapore alone and you're looking for a place to live, then I highly recommend finding a spacious 2 or 3 bedroom and splitting with some housemates, because you're going to get a lot more value out of that unit rather than a tiny 1-bedroom or studio, which will cost potentially twice as much. All right, so if you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about moving to Singapore, let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next. I do plan on making some more videos about moving to Singapore and setting up my life here and sharing some of my experiences and tips that I think might be helpful for anyone trying to move here as well. As always, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.